Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a viewer ask me a question yesterday, something I haven't heard anyone ask in a long time, but it's something that has floated out there uh, in bodybuilding mythology for so many decades that I figure I'll go ahead and address it since someone asked it. He asked me, hey, how much protein can the body really absorb in one meal or one sitting towards building muscle? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. All right, guys, this is one of these questions that it's realistically, when you understand the history of the question, it starts to make sense how silly it is. And when you understand how difficult it is to measure and how much money's been wasted trying to get an answer and researchers can't really pinpoint it, should tell you something. That means basically the bodybuilding magazines just made this up. They just made it up to sell protein shakes. And I'm not even necessarily anti-protein shake, but what they used to say, oh, your body can only absorb 20 grams or 30 grams of protein in one sitting, right? And I'm older, guys. I've been in this a long time. You know what I remember? I remember 15, 20 years ago, I actually knew guys, because you guys got to remember, a lot of bodybuilders and meatheads are really stupid. Let's just be honest. Let's be honest. A lot of the ones even on YouTube are really stupid. Plenty of examples. They're not high-functioning individuals. I met at least one guy, I knew a guy years ago who, because of reading that in the magazines, he would mix up a big, like 50-gram protein shake. He would drink half of it while sitting down and then get up and walk around for 5 minutes and sit back down and drink the other one because he could only absorb half of the protein shake in one sitting. That's what the magazine said. So he got up and walked around for 5 minutes to sit down and drink the other half. Okay, that's the level of stupidity this stuff leads to. And here's the biggest thing that people need to be thinking about. The questions you should be asking are, don't you mean how much protein could you absorb over a unit of time? That would be a better question, right? Instead of a meal, does that mean anything? I mean, realistically, in terms of your digestive system and absorption time, when you think about how long it takes for all that to pass through, do you really think a sitting or a meal is the particularly important to this? I mean, because realistically, if you eat a steak right now, you do know you're still absorbing some nutrients from that steak even tomorrow, right? If you eat it right now for breakfast, by the time you get to tomorrow's lunch, it's still in your GI tract. You know you haven't absorbed 100% of it yet. There's still a little tiny trickle of it going. Hopefully people are aware of that. What you get is a nice big spike and then a trickle down for each food. Now, we shouldn't even be asking how much protein can be used for muscle growth. None of you are using more than 3 to 5 grams of protein in a single day for muscle growth, right? The amount of muscle that a noob can gain is probably the amount of protein found in an apple in a single day. That's how much protein you're using to actually build new muscle tissue. If you don't believe me, go look at the math. Go look at how much protein is in a pound of meat, and then ask yourself how long it takes to really build an entire pound of muscle mass. All right, about 100 grams roughly in a pound of meat. The rest of it's water and other stuff. There's not that much protein is really used. So I think what people really mean is how much can be left over, how much can be used to prevent certain amounts of tissue breakdown, how much can give an anabolic signal. That's really what you mean. Not how much is used, because almost none. A few grams. Right? A few grams. Like the amount of protein in your big protein shake is probably a week's worth of muscle growth in that one shake that you're drinking every day. So that's the wrong question. The problem we come to is that when it comes to muscle protein synthesis rates, they've tried to study this. Quite a few people here in the fitness world who have advanced degrees have been involved in research on this. They have struggled to pinpoint exact numbers, even with the modern technology and measuring equipment, because they run into some problems. You see, different proteins and foods digest and absorb at different rates. So what they've tried to do is just use whey protein for different things to see how much amino acid use gets done, how much of it gets turned into fuel, all this other stuff, right? Trying to find this number using just whey protein. Well, and they haven't been able to pinpoint that perfectly, there's been some conflicting data, and they're basing it on kilos of body weight versus grams of protein, all these other factors, and they've gotten mixed results. Some people, even when it's pure whey protein, they see increased muscle protein synthesis anywhere from something like zero point 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight up to like 0.6. So somewhere between 40 and 60 grams of whey protein in one particular serving, depending upon the person, their age. They actually find older people need a little more. And the thing is, you get this scale of diminished returns and all of this, guys. The problem we run into is that this is even when you take something like whey protein and people fasted. That's not useful to people in the real world. No one is consuming whey protein. No one realistic and sane consumes whey protein powder as their only protein source for a week straight. Most of us eat other foods besides brown rice and protein shakes. And even the brown rice has some protein in it, doesn't it? So the problem you run into is that different foods absorb and digest at different rates. And people say, oh, well, you should be able to get the most absorption out of the whey. Well, not necessarily, because it passes through the GI tract faster in general. You might get a larger spike initially, but you also get a smaller trickle down. So we run into enormous problems of absorption. We run into enormous problems of how much of it's being used for energy. And, here's what it comes down to. Protein loading and high protein intakes aren't even necessarily about maximum muscle gain. That's why I tell people, if you're a hard gainer who struggles to eat enough calories to gain weight, you don't necessarily want a bunch of protein. You need a fair amount, but you shouldn't be protein loading. You shouldn't be trying to get 200 grams of protein a day. If you weigh $150 and you cannot eat enough food to gain weight, the last thing you want to do is eat more protein. Why? Protein is appetite suppressing, and protein, a lot of it that you consume just used for energy. All of us who are eating high protein diets, we're not building muscle with all that protein. We're using it for fuel. It's an inefficient fuel source. It wastes calories. Now, that's great if you're someone with a high appetite who gains weight easily, right? Who's trying to improve their body composition. A real high protein diet's amazing for that. But the hard gainer who struggles to eat enough, well, that's the last thing they want to do. To burn more calories and suppress your appetite when you're someone who struggles to eat enough food to gain weight, and you really think adding more protein to your diet is a good idea given what we know about protein? Probably not. Someone like me adding more protein to my diet, someone who gains body fat easy, has an insane appetite. Someone who struggles to keep their calories as low as 3,000 a day really requires a lot of work, because to me that's like no food. It becomes a really valuable tool at that point, doesn't it? Because it wastes energy and it suppresses appetite, and it's very muscle sparing. So there's more going on here than just building muscle. People are focusing on the wrong elements of it. Not that much protein is used for that. But here's the thing. What they're finding as far as anabolic signaling goes, sometimes increasing protein intake 50% versus what's considered to be a roughly ideal when they come up with calculations like, eat, at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that means someone who's 200 pounds, about 150 grams of protein. But what you find is that increasing that another 50% can increase muscle protein synthesis, sometimes a little tiny amount. So then you have to ask the question, is that little tiny amount worth it to you? Do you want to consume a higher protein diet? Do you want to pay the extra money for a higher protein diet? Do you want to deal with the extra appetite suppression that might be an issue for some people? For others, that's a blessing. For some people, that's a curse. Because ultimately what it comes down to is calories are going to be more anabolic in general than just straight protein. So if a person can't get enough calories and they get that little tiny potential muscle protein synthesis intake increase on that extra protein, if it's costing them their caloric deficit, then it's going to equal less muscle gain. So what we're getting to here is that people are really asking the wrong question, worried about silly shit like this. They need to be worried about total energy intake. They need to be worried about total energy turnover when it comes to muscle mass and body composition. And they need to be saying, okay, how much protein can I afford financially? What's my budget look like? Because protein is the most expensive of your macronutrients, versus the benefits I may or may not gain from it, versus what's my appetite look like. Because that's where protein shines, is as an appetite control agent more than anything else. That's where it shines. People who eat a little less protein are going to be able to eat more food. People who eat more protein are going to eat less food. right? It's an appetite control agent. That's where your biggest benefit to body composition comes from when you start manipulating protein intake. That and it's muscle sparing. So for people who are losing weight, it becomes very valuable through all those pathways. So we're asking the wrong questions here, and people are going back asking a silly question that was a myth completely started by bodybuilding magazines that were basically sponsored by supplement companies in order to sell more protein shakes. Because if you can only absorb a small amount of protein every day and you're only going to eat three or four meals, then you needed those extra protein shakes between meals, right? That was the whole idea. So that people would drink 3 protein shakes every day spread out. That was why that was started. Nothing to do with science, because we can't even accurately measure it today. How in the hell did bodybuilding magazines and writers who had no access to research equipment, definitely didn't have the modern equipment we have today, how in the hell did they ever come up with that? They didn't. They just made it up because it was a good sales gimmick, but it was put in magazines for years to where it became something that was dogmatic and taught, and everyone believed it because, the Joe Weider magazine said it was so. They made it up. We can't even answer the question today completely. We don't have a set answer. There's too many variables, and the researchers have complained they can't study it correctly because there's too many variables for them to even get accurate measurements with it sometimes. It's too complicated. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.